welcome to KidLit Catalyst. Today we're joined by Whitford Paul and Daniel Bernstrom.
Each story is a challenge, but it does in many ways get easier. Daniel, it's so good to see you again.
Yes, it's like a little reunion.
I get to do your introductions, lucky me, and they're quite notable. So this is going to be, I wish there were a Cliff Note version, but you two are so successful that this is going to take a while. If you don't already know them, we're just delighted to share about their work and hear more about how they do their creative crafts. And you get to meet Whitford Paul. She was inspired to write picture books after years of reading them for her 4 children. Love that. That's a lot of laundry. I know. That's it. She's published for
Celeste, I remember.
Yeah.
Well, and Daniel, how many do you have? 5.
5? Daniel, that's awesome. Yay, kids. And you're right. It's so fun to read to them. Now I have grandkids to read too. And
Right.
Anne has published more than 20 of them, 20 books, not children. And she's won several awards, including the New York Times Notable Books, Carl Sandburg Award of Children's Literature, Bank Street College Book Lists, Notable Science and Social Studies books, as well as being nominated for several state reading awards. Her book, Writing Picture Books, has become the standard for many picture book teachers and aspiring writers. And now it's an expanded edition, so I just bought it. It has all you need to know from story creation to publication. And we get to talk with her today. And we have Daniel. Daniel Bernstrom is the critically acclaimed author of the picture books One Day in the Eucalyptus Tree. Doesn't that make you want to sit down and read it to a kid? Just the title. And Gator, 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 which is a creative exploration of a little girl.
Thank you.
And the Minnesota Book Award winning Big Papa and the Time Machine. His books have been
find that book to hold up for you, Daniel.
I don't have it with me, like a horrible.
But it's already one of our favorites.
It is. I love the line, "Oh, I was scared." Big Papa said, "Sometimes you got to walk with giants if you're ever going to know what you made of. That's called being brave." Such a good line. Such a good. Yes, more of that. Can't wait to read that to my grandkids. And his books have been on a number of notable lists, including the CCBC, that's Cooperative Children's Book Center I have in front of me, or I might not have been able to say that quickly, the American Library Association, and PBS Virtual Let's Learn program. Ooh, ooh. Additionally, his books have been nominated for several state awards as well, such as Minnesota, Iowa, Arizona, and Illinois. Daniel currently works as an English facility member for Minnesota West Community and Technical College in Worthington, Minnesota, where we are finding him today. Thank you both for joining us. We're so excited to chat with you.
Anne and I know each other because Anne had asked me to judge for her amazing picture book contest. And I had bought her book. I had bought her book on writing for picture books because I like to just stay sharp, and it's like, oh, this is a really good book. And I was reading it. I'm like underlining, like, yes, this is amazing. I particularly like the section on poetry. It is probably one of the best explanation of poetry out there for picture books, and you nailed it. Mm-hmm. And just she did. It was just perfect. And anyway, so I had this book, and then I realized, I looked at the name, Anne Whitford Paul. I was like, oh man, I just met her.
Good thing you didn't know beforehand, right? You would have been all intimidated.
I would have.
Yeah.
I don't know if I could have talked. So
yeah. It's an amazing book. Laurie and I, before we got on the air, we were talking about how we just don't ever seem to be able to keep our copies of it, because we're always like handing them to somebody and then we have to replace them.
I do want to give credit in terms of that the poetry section, I didn't ever think that I was a poet by any stretch of the imagination.
Too.
But I had a first, no, don't shake your head. This is my very first book published, was called Owl at Night. And it was a prose book. And I went to a breakfast with authors event, and someone said to me, your book is so poetic. You must be a poet. And it made me nervous. So I heard about a class at UCLA with Myra Cohn Livingston. And many of you may know her name. She was a fantastic teacher, tough. Oh my God, tough. And sometimes she made me even cry. But I took class after class after class with her. The class really helped me so much. She talked with us about, she would make us do poems in iambic and then do them in anapest and then in dactyl and then in trochee, the same poem, and see how it would change. And she would make us learn those rhythms until we could just recognize them in an instant. So she really was an amazing help. And I say this because there are a lot of people, I think, like me, who don't think they're poetic, or that they can't ever write poetry because there's too much to learn. But I'm a prime example of working hard at learning the craft. And there was a saying in our house, because we had a daughter who was an impossible adolescent and ended up going to medical school and becoming a doctor. And my husband used to say, if Henya can do it, anybody can do it. So I say this about poetry. If I can learn poetry, anybody can. Don't be scared of it. So.
Love that.
I looked over because I was sure I had a copy of her book right here, but
it's called Poem Making.
Yep.
And I don't know if it's still in print, but it's certainly available at libraries.
Yeah, no, I think the ones I have right there are all the adult how-to books, in that one is now in my big shelf of,
well,
that kids shelf.
That book was written for elementary school students and middle grade students, but I think it's so clear and good for adults too. So.
And that's what I like about your teaching, Anne, is that you can break it down in a way that's really understandable. I mean, I remember listening to you. Oh, Celeste, when would that have been? Like, well, it's over 20 years ago.
Oh, at least, yes.
Yeah.
Probably 24, 25. Something.
I remember being so
24.
So Anne, my only issue with your book is that when I'm reading it, it's a plus and a minus, because I can't go through it quickly because I read it hearing your voice. And you have this wonderful, expressive way, and so I have to read it at that pace.
Well, I thought you were going to say one of the complaints about the book is that the print is so small.
Oh, no. Yeah.
Someone said it's an 8-point print.
Really?
No. And and sorry for this, this loving on your book, but it really is that amazing. So if anyone's interested,
come on.
if anyone is interested in not poetry, in writing for children, because we're talking about that just writing for children and how to do it well, especially picture books. And I mean it. Anne's book is the book. So I was taught how to write picture books by Jacqueline Briggs Martin, Caldecott Award winner of Snowflake Bentley. I was taught poetry form by Phyllis Root, Rattletrap Car, and Big Mama Made the Universe, or something like that. Sorry, Phyllis, if you're listening. And if I could take everything I learned in graduate school for writing for picture books, like where my MFA is in, I could just lay that book down and say, this is everything you need to know. And I'm serious about that. So it makes sense that you took all those classes, but and thank you for telling us that story about the poetry section, because it makes sense now why, because some people talk about poetry and they're like, oh, it's like this. No, it was exactly. So if people want to write in a poetic way, and treats it, so it's literally the one-stop book. I'm going to be doing a conference, teaching at a conference this summer, and that's the book I'm going to require all of the participants to buy, because it's, I mean, I'm lazy and I don't want to answer all those questions.
I wholeheartedly agree, Daniel. That is the first book that I recommend to anybody who comes and says, how do I get started in this business? Or I have an idea for a book. Where do I begin? I tell them to join SCBWI and buy Ann's book.
Totally. And Ann knows this, but I have used her book in every class that I've taught about picture books, because it is the one that has everything in it. But it's also so accessible. I mean, the language is, I mean, you could hand this to, an older kid, and they would get what they needed out of it too, So
we're making her blush right now. Do you see?
You are making me blush, and I want to just say one thing, and then let's move on, because
that is so you.
And I want to say one of the things about writing a book like that is that you learn while you're writing. It solidifies your knowledge and your thinking. And the first book, I used examples from literature, from published books. And this time it just got too complicated. And, part of the earnings go toward that picture book grant award, and I'm not making money on it. And they wanted so much money. So this time I just decided to make up my own examples, and you learn from that. I mean, when you made those cards, Deb, about writing that they were little
the
cards.
fiction magic cards,
right?
So
you learned while you were doing that, didn't you? It's fascinating.
Back to Ann's point about learning poetry, I think you do. You need as terrible as it sounds, you need an honest teacher, even if they make you cry. So Jacqueline Briggs Martin was that for me. She was an honest teacher, and she was this is what you do. Don't deviate. And Phyllis Root was, everything you do is wonderful. Everything you do is okay. Follow your heart and follow your dreams. And I think that both of those teachers were necessary for me. I needed the structure, but then I needed the permission to play. So
love that permission to play. Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I was thinking of another teacher that I had about children's literature was Sue Alexander. I don't know if any of you remember Sue, but Sue was so tough. She would handwrite in pencil on those yellow they were legal pad length, and she would write 4 or 5 pages of critiques on both sides. And one time she wrote on mine, "This doesn't work and it's boring too." But you do appreciate that honesty. You don't learn. I mean, I get what you say about Phyllis Root being very supportive of you and encouraging, which is wonderful. But when I'm teaching, I try to be supportive, but I also think you don't learn if things are not pointed out to you. And sometimes that's very painful.
Mhm.
Yeah, and it's something we
That
have
structure.
to really, we have to learn that. Yeah, one of the critique groups that I'm in calls themselves the cruel critiquers.
The cruel
Yeah, cruel.
or cruel?
Cruel.
Cruel
CR.
Well, it took me a long time to realize that they were not criticizing me, but in my critique group, but they were criticizing the writing. And although you're personally involved in the writing, that isn't, you're not being criticized as a not worthy person, I don't think. And I always, after a while, I got used to it, and I wouldn't be upset driving home. And I look for it now. I look for people who will tell me this doesn't work.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. It's like a fast forward, putting it in your drawer. You could put it in your drawer for 2 months, open it up with fresh eyes and go, oh, that part just didn't work. Or you can have an excellent teacher critiques group that's like, that doesn't work.
Right.
Fast
And
forward.
usually when someone says that doesn't work, I've known it doesn't work. I've had a little tweak there in the back of my head. Something's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But I need someone to point it out to me.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to think of like what that person is, but there's that like belief, like to keep that student going so they don't give up. And there's some things that especially teaching college students, there's some things that they're never going to get to right away. You can notice potential, and you can notice that, okay, if they keep moving on this path, they're going to be pretty good. But there's a lot that they have to learn, and there's things that I can't, there's pain that I cannot save them from. There's so many rejections they're going to have to go through. There's some and it's going to be that sting, and that sting will teach them, and then they'll come back, and it's like parenting. Like, I have a kid that won't believe me whatever I say. It's like, okay, well, here's what it is. You can go out and try, and when it doesn't work, come back to me, and then we'll have this conversation again.
Right.
So yeah, but those teachers, and I think there's a role for each one in your life. But yeah, to couch yourself only into one, that could be then it's like the emperor with no clothes, and
Right.
you think you're wonderful, but you're like,
Daniel, I'm really curious if Phyllis and Jacqueline knew that they were playing those roles, if it was a good cop, bad cop situation, or if you just lucked into that.
No, they know. They're very good friends.
Okay,
and
that's very neat.
well, and Phyllis, I always knew when she like was upset or was not happy, because she would always say, you might consider, and I'm like, you might consider means change that or else. So I had to
Wasn't she the one who wrote Going on a Moose Hunt, or was that?
I don't know. I feel awful. I'd have to look it up. She's written a ton.
Looking for a moose, or the moose were looking for something. Oh, I just loved it. Anyway, I'm jealous you got to study with her.
Oh, she's if you want someone to she's wonderful to have on something like this, but she really says, like, okay, I want you to play, and in your, like, kind of Montessori, just hey, in your play you're going to learn some things. So I feel like if I feel like I really needed that structure first, and then to know how to play, and then to play. And so so that way your mind can be free to explore different things, and because I don't know.
You know what to do with them. You have then the skills to take that plaything and shape it into something.
Yeah. It's kind of like that age-old adage, know the rules so you can break them.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I see so many writers that really fall into one or the other of those camps, kind of in the extreme, right? They're either all play, but they don't have the structure to get it to a polished format, or they're all work, but they don't let themselves experience that creativity and coming up with something, completely original and new, because they don't give themselves that time to play. It's really hard to find that balance, I think, and to appreciate kind of both sides of that energy.
Yeah, and they're both really needed. It's that, discovering the order in the chaos.
Right. And being able to switch back and forth between them, right? Like, okay, here's where I'm going to be in play mode and generating ideas, and now I've got to switch to structure and making it happen, and then you got to kind of switch back, right? Like you've got to really manage what state of mind you're in, and it's tricky. It's something we learn over time, I think.
Well,
and how great for young adults, that I'm guessing would be most of what Daniel's students are, to have someone who understands the real writing process, because it's amazing to me how in teaching methods courses they are still teaching like my pet peeves, things like don't say said, because there are other words that will really, let people know what you mean there, or some of those things that I still see even in the teachers that I work with. And so it's, yeah.
Daniel, how do you find time to write
Good question.
and play with your job and 5 children?
well, okay, I'm gonna turn it back on you first. When did you start writing?
When my 3rd child was born.
So you're gonna answer first, and then I'm gonna answer next.
All right, I will answer. I was kind of a mean mother. When my kids napped, I wrote. I didn't clean the house. I didn't cook the dinner. I didn't do anything. When that was my time. Then when I took them to the park, I didn't push them on the swings. When they asked me to play house with them, I just rationalized that. And sometimes I would say I played when I was your age, and now I really worked hard to grab time, and I rationalized it. I really rationalized it, that they were growing up to be independent and could learn to entertain themselves. And that's how I did it. I didn't stay up late at night, or and when they went to school, oh my God, I wrote all the time. And then I would take them on errands because I hadn't done them before. I wasn't totally a mean, uninvolved mother, but I really searched for time to work. Otherwise, I would have been a mean, mad mother all the time.
Well,
my husband and I used to say, Anne, that all kids need their Lord of the Flies time.
Oh, no.
We were doing them a service because they will need their Lord of the Flies.
I have to tell you one really sad story one time.
Yeah.
And obviously I did things with them, but I want to make a point that I worked hard to grab time, which, as Daniel knows, is hard. But one day I was working in my office, and the kids, they were a little bit older. I think my son was probably about 5 at the time, and I wasn't being totally neglectful, but I was writing in there, and he knew not to bother me, and all at once I felt this breath on my neck. He was standing behind my chair, quiet as could be, just breathing. Oh. I felt terrible. I did stop writing. Tried to be there for him for 5 minutes.
Actually,
anyway, Daniel.
I just wanted to say, Anne, though, that I think what you did give them was modeling following your dreams.
Mm-hmm. Well, that may be true. And I was a good mother. My kid, I was. And well, I don't know if they would think so. Maybe they wouldn't.
Let's call them. Just kidding.
But, I guess I exaggerated because I really want writers to know that they need to grab the time. And I'm not one of those people who stays up until 1 a.m. and gets up at 5 to write. I couldn't do that. Daniel, do you do that?
So with that, I want to interpret what Anne just said.
I love Daniel.
So as as an adult, right? And you're like, you love your kids, and you start to but the kids love you so much that they would take they'll take as much of you as they possibly can. That's true with my wife. That's true with me. As soon as dad comes home, it's like, the expectation for dad to be there all the time.
Right.
And so, and this is something that I've had to learn of, that what's best for my kids is for daddy to be mentally, like, I love that, the mean mad mother or the mean mad dad, that like, I just need to breathe. I need to breathe. I still have my passions and my joys, and I'm still an important person who still has dreams too. Now, that's something that that's something that kids need to learn, but letting them know, like okay, this is my writing time. Or even what Anne said about, hey, because I didn't get this done, then they're going with me on errands. So was that necessarily a bad thing? It right. Probably was really, really good. So but I thought that I needed to be 100% all in, and I realized it was impossible to do. And you feel like a terrible mother. You feel like a mean father. I mean, Anne's at home, but she's working. But she's doing a really important job. And and for me, I'm going to work, and then I write too on this. So it's like 2 jobs at the same time. So I am one that gets up at 5 a.m. or 4 a.m. But I go to bed like about 7 o'clock. This poor head of mine starts to just not function. I can't stay awake, or but we do 15 minutes. So we have we have a baby at 6 months. So we do 15 minutes with the 4 kids, like every night. So at the end of the day, the kid gets to pick whoever it is, have mom and dad for 15 minutes. And that taught me that it's
That's
not a,
great.
well, it taught me it wasn't necessarily about the amount of time as much as it was about the focused, like, mom and dad love you and we will do whatever you want within reason for 15 minutes. And how much that is, or just a date, right? We take them off on dates, or they get to pick a family activity, giving them agency. And that goes a long way. So then when I ask them, hey, daddy has this deadline, can you please stay out of this room on the weekend because daddy has to finish that. Yeah. They're usually pretty respectful of that because they know at the end of the day that's going to be
that 15 minutes. Well, you put it, you're more organized than I was on that. I certainly, from dinner time on through bedtime, I didn't work on writing. That was family time. And my husband used to complain every time he would come home at night, like you, Daniel, the kids would just dive to him. And we have a study here in the house, and he would go into the study just wanting 15 minutes alone, and the kids would dive in. He would say, this is the family room. It's not my office. It's the family room, because wherever he was, they went. But anyway, we both survived and the kids survive. And how old are your kids, Daniel?
7, 6, 5, 2, and 6 months.
Wow.
So I'm in the middle, but I think, Anne's answer was tells people a lot. You need a ton of time. There are some amazing people that can just write, and maybe Mo Willems was perfect right away. I hate that man. I hope he's listening. Now,
doesn't he only have one child or something?
I don't know, but how does he do it? How does he do it? So unless you're Mo Willems, I'm not. And I spend, and this is my question for you or anyone. It's like, especially those poetry books, they take forever. They absolutely take hours and hours and hours. And the editor says, oh, can we change this one idea? And I'm like, oh my. So
one thing just balloons through the whole manuscript.
Thank you. Goodness, someone else agrees with me. But it takes hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. And there's no way to make it for the average person to learn the craft. Now your eye, Anne, is, very, through all those hours, it's clear. But it's you're right. You need to take a ton of time. And where do you find it? You have to put boundaries and.
Well, and you have to decide what's important to you. And that was really important to me. Let's talk about changes in a manuscript, Daniel, since you brought that up. It always, in the beginning, I remember getting suggestions and I would make the change and take it back to group. And they'd say, oh, no, that doesn't work. Well, I didn't realize, it took me a long time to think, oh, it's not that simple. One change just throws everything off. It changes everything. And I laugh sometimes when we're in writing group and we talk about, should we use the word the or right? The or an. You just spend ridiculous amounts of time on these things that it seem utterly insignificant to others.
I thought you addressed this in your book. I'm trying to remember, but I thought you did, where the purpose of the book, whether it's poetry or not, you need to have your central, you did talk about it,
Right.
your central thing, or the problem that the character has to solve, or the issue, or the one thing.
The one thing, right.
And if that's missing, the whole thing goes kaputski. It's just gone.
Right.
And you think, and it's weird, as the writer, you think that you have it, or you think you know, but that's the thing in the back of your mind. You're like, oh, I'm just trying to make this work. But therefore, the discussions about and the now, I'll be honest, are stupid, because it means, well, I mean,
it means nothing if you don't have your main, if you don't know what you're saying,
or your story, if
right,
if your story isn't set up. So with the poetry, if you have your story set, then if an editor comes back and forth, that makes changes a lot easier, because then you know what your storyline is, and you know what can or cannot be changed. And that took me a long time to figure out, because then I would literally revise the whole book, and I'd start from the beginning and go to the end. And Gator was that way, and until I found, boom, there's the story. But now I can find it easier.
I think you're making a interesting point there, Daniel, which I find also when I'm writing. I write a draft, and it may be a while before I figure out what I'm trying to say. It isn't always, I'm going to write a story about this. It's writing and then finding that core, and you have to find that core somewhere along the process.
Yeah,
I could totally relate to that. I spent years revising the manuscript for Emmanuel's Dream, but my revisions were just tweaks, right? It was refining something that wasn't working to begin with. Right. It was polishing coal. And eventually, after all that time, I learned enough that, oh, I just need to throw this away and start over from scratch. And then I had something that worked, right? But I mean, it wasn't wasted time, because I was learning something all through that process. But now I'm really wary of, oh, am I just polishing something that isn't right yet to begin with? We can get lost in that minutia and the details, and not be looking at whether we've got the right idea.
Right, yeah, but I admire you for throwing it out and being willing to start again. And I think that's where some writers or would-be writers are often too discouraged to do that, or unwilling to do that. And
that's exactly what happened. Is I thought, I have to give up. I'm not getting anywhere. I have to quit. I have to throw this away. And then the new version just came to me like out of nowhere, like, no, this is how it should be.
Right.
So yeah, I kind of had to get to that point of, I've got to put this away, and experience that frustration in order to break through.
To do well.
Yeah.
I that's the difference between a published author and an unpublished author, I think. Willing to do that.
For me, sometimes it's also it's like, I love playing with words. It's like, can't we just forget about the story? Can I just have fun with all the sounds and the meanings they evoke for me? And wouldn't that just be glorious? It's like, oh gosh. And then Anne brought up my fiction magic cards, and it dawned on me today, oh, I need to pull those out. So, thanks for that nudge.
How quickly we forget.
Yeah. But like Anne, I also can relate to the details, because I just had a back and forth with an editor who changed a comma to a period, and I had to set it and say, no, it has to be a comma. It changes the whole meaning if it's a period.
Right, right.
I wrote probably a paragraph explaining why it had to be a comma that was longer than the entire picture book manuscript. So yes, we still get lost in the details,
In
right?
the
It has
details.
to be right once you get it to that level.
Yeah.
Every choice is deliberate.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Or the times when, I have like this perfect rhyme and then the editor sends it back and suggests I throw in this other word. And it's like, okay, I see why you wanted the meaning of that, line tweaked a little bit, but that word is not going to fit in there,
Yeah.
Right.
I'll get back to you in a couple months.
It's like, okay, so I'll work on that this week.
This month.
Right.
But back to that like idea. If you work in rhyme, that's why like spending time with that poetry section, literally, and to have, instead of like, I have like 6 poetry books that that I to learn in different forms and things, which is fun. But once I started, because I keep writing in poetry, so then so I can recognize the problem pretty easy, and then I can fix it far easier than when I first started.
Right.
So the experienced writer versus the inexperienced, it's a lot easier to fix, because now I know the rules, where before it was like, oh, it has to sound a certain way. With the rules and the sound, it works together. But it is easier and more structured. I mean, without meter and rhyme.
I do love the challenge of writing in rhyme, though. I think the parameters are pretty clear on what you do, and it's more of a challenge, but it's easier to know when you've got it right. I can judge my poetry better than I can judge my prose, just because of the rules there. And the rules make it a challenge, which is fun.
Not depressing.
No, I don't find it depressing at all. Do you find it depressing?
Oh, I do, Anne. I do.
I get it, Anne.
Do you know, one of the assignments that we did in Myra's class was she gave us 6 words, and we had to write a poem using those 6 words. And that challenge of getting those 6 words in and making a poem that said something was so exciting. And everybody's poem was incredibly different. And we went around the class and read these poems, and each one was breathtaking in different ways. And that's why, anyway, after that, at the end, she said, we have to publish this. And she did. She published it as a book. I forget the title of it, of 1 word and 3 words and 6 words that we wrote these poems. But that's why I like the structure of poems, because it gives me room to go like we did in that class. It was stunning.
Yeah, sometimes we need those constraints.
Yep.
Right.
To allow us to be creative, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
What box am I in? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I like having that challenge too. But it does sometimes get depressing when it doesn't work, Daniel.
Well, it takes time to work it out, I guess. But also, Daniel, I also would comment for people who are just starting out and writing in rhyme or writing in any form. And in the beginning, it's hard and it takes time, but the more you work, the more you learn. Those lessons are in the back of your head, and it does each story is a challenge, but it does in many ways get easier, I think, because we have this background. And so best thing I can say in terms of advice, besides reading, is writing. The more you write, the more you will learn by your mistakes. And, writing, sitting down once a month for an hour is not going to do it. Right? Daniel.
Yeah.
Daniel, what's your best advice?
Thank you. And I'll have to leave in a little bit to torture more students with with writing. But Anne made me think of one of my greatest tools, which is reading and writing at the same time, which
wow.
Well, so man, I really admire your books. Now, and each writer does things a little bit differently. So if I admire a writer, then I take their book, and then that becomes what we're talking about, poetry. That becomes the form or the fence or the 6 words. And you look at it, and then you start writing like Anne, or you start writing like Deb. And it's almost like her hand is with you as you're, I didn't do it quite right. How did she do it there? And you start to learn, you could call it mentor text, you can call it whatever.
Right.
But you find something you admire. Cleary and, I get these two, Ramona the Pest and, what is her name? It'll come to me. Anyway.
Tonight at 3 a.m.
Yeah, it will. Read a lot of Beverly Cleary and said, I want to be like Beverly Cleary. And she got like a stack of her books and started to write like that. And now, if she listens to this, I'll be so embarrassed. But that she was mentored. She was mentored by Beverly Cleary. And they're not the same. They really aren't. But to study under a master. So pick up a book, but don't just read it. Interact with it and try to learn from that artist.
Totally. And I've done a class called Piggyback Picture Books, but and that's what you just described is exactly what happens there. Sometimes it's like, so what is the element in this? I have like people look at the books they love, and what are the elements that you love about that book? Is it the format? Is it the voice? Is it the topic? Try to analyze what it is that drew you to that book, and then try to copy it. I mean, we learn anything and everything by imitation. Right. It's how we learn to speak. And so that's excellent
I think all
advice.
writing
Thank you.
Piggybacks on what writing went before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's like reading is input and writing is output.
Oh, that's a good way to put it. Yeah.
This has been such an amazing conversation that I don't want to cut it short. And we probably now have to have another one because there's commonality of having books that make a difference. We're just such a delight to have this conversation. I feel like there have been so many quotes that you could pull out from this. Thank you for sharing some of your great depth of experience.
Well,
thank you so much.
Great conversation.
Good to see you. Thank you, everybody.
Hug.